I do think that grief can transform us. I believe it's meant to transform us. It made me stronger, but it also made me softer. And the softness is what's been this beautiful, open space for new love to come in. I am answering some of your questions today. I love doing these episodes so much. I love to hear from the community what you want to hear. And I had put out a question recently to our text community and kind of just gave you free rein to ask whatever you wanted. Probably should have known that there would be some questions in the realm of dating, divorce, calling in aligned love. So we're going there today, friends. This is not a topic I ever thought I would be talking about on a podcast. And here we are. I was joking with my friends / podcast team just about how I'm sure anyone who's been through divorce specifically, you never imagine you're going to find yourself there. I never imagined that this would be as my friend Patrice Washington says, like that this would be my ministry. And I get so many messages from women in our community who are going through really big relationship transitions or newly entering the dating world. And I have such a deeper understanding now for, number one, how to support yourself through that process. Number two, how important all the things that we talk about on this podcast, like really having a clear vision and maintaining and cultivating a mindset that supports what you want to see versus listening to all of the chatter that's out there on the internet about what the dating world is like. I've learned a lot in a very, very short time, and I'm going to dive into some of these questions, not at all as someone who has this figured out, as someone who's very much figuring this out right along with you. And I think especially this conversation about dating and divorce and relationships as an ambitious woman adds this extra layer, not of difficulty, not of more scarcity. I think there can be this conversation that there's just not the type of aligned partners that people want available. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today, just something that I've really adopted for myself as I've started to explore, like, what does the next chapter of my life, specifically as it relates to love and dating, what does that look like? What do I want it to look like? So I'm grateful for these questions. I'm already sweating a little bit, just the thought of talking about this. But here we are, because this kind of vulnerability, intimacy with all of you is really what I want to cultivate. I want to have these conversations. And like I said, just give myself permission to also be discovering for myself what my truth is when it comes to relationships now. So the first question is probably the one that I hear and relate to the most. And it was from Carolyn Frost, who asked, why is dating these days so difficult for women who work in the professional world but are looking for a partner who's willing to be an equal in the relationship? She went on to say, I've had the absolute worst luck in the last 2 years with dating, mainly from guys who seem to just want to be taken care of and babied. I'm not a mom for a reason, so I don't really want to take care of my partner, which is valid. She said, I want a partner to take care of themselves so we can grow, learn, and become that power couple I've always wanted to become. And I wanted to read the full question because I think that the way we describe our relationship expectations and experiences says a lot about some potentially hidden beliefs that we have that are blocking the very thing that we want. I'm going to read one other question because these two really mirror the same thing that I wanted to share and really the same underlying question. So Makira Oliver said, I'm a business owner of a group practice, and I'm struggling with the balancing act of a love life and managing my business. I work long days and sometimes feel lonely. How do we date with purpose and find partners who will be supportive and genuine? I just feel like we should start probably like a group chat for this because it's such a real conversation. It's such a real question. And I think underneath it all, what I hear, even from, girlfriends of mine who have very difficult stories when it comes to their experiences with dating, underneath it all, underneath the frustration, what I can really hear is a desire, like this deep desire to have that kind of connection that I think we all fundamentally want. We want to feel seen and loved and supported. And while, yes, I know that probably if you're relating to this question and nodding along with what these two women shared, you probably have a lot of evidence for how true that is, that it's really difficult to find a certain kind of partner. But I want to share a little bit of a different perspective. This is kind of, if you want to know what it's like to have me as your actual friend, this is the conversation I would have with you. And this is the conversation I had with myself when I knew that I was not quite ready, but starting to entertain the idea of being ready to think about potentially dating or relationships. And I realized early on that I was going to have to be very clear about the beliefs that I was going to allow into my psyche, into my world when it came to dating, because it doesn't take more than just a scroll through the Instagram algorithm to realize that for the most part, there's not as much, depending on what kind of algorithm you're in, there's not as much positive talk about the dating world right now. And I think that what I realized was the same thing that I believe about aging, is that what we adopt in terms of our beliefs, what we say on repeat, really starts to affect what we see in terms of possibilities. So here's kind of the theory that I was looking to test for myself. Our mind is constantly being flooded with millions of pieces of information. There could literally be your dream of all dream partners in your atmosphere. It could be like 2 degrees of separation away. But if your belief system is there are no good guys, there are no aligned partners, fill in the blank with what it is that you're looking for, you're literally not going to see them. They're not going to come and knock on your door. They're not going to find you and kind of break through this wall that we put up. And it's so valid because it's based in fear. It's based in like this fundamental fear of like, will I ever find someone? Will I get to experience what I want? So instead, I think as a protective mechanism, we can start to fall into these beliefs that are unintentionally preventing us from connecting with what we actually want. So the first thing that I did was I really just took a look at what in my external reality is reflecting back what I believe is possible. Number one, you have to really look at what are you saying on a repeating basis that you believe. And number two, it's going to reflect what we believe we are worthy of. These are the two places to look. If our external reality in any area, love or business or friendship, isn't mirroring back what we want to have, it's typically looking at, okay, how am I describing my situation? How am I describing myself in my situation? And if you start to notice that when you're talking with girlfriends, it's constantly about the disappointing experiences in dating or the expectation that good people don't exist, there may be an underlying belief that is blocking you from having what you want. And then the second one is if you find that the majority of your conversations are more about yourself in a disparaging way or in a way that you don't believe that you can have, like you see other people have beautiful relationships, but you don't believe it's possible for you, and you can name the reason, right? Doesn't even matter what the reason is, but your belief system is telling you, I believe that kind of love is out there. I just don't think it's possible for me. These are the two roots that, for the most part, I think are blocking people from having what it is that they want in, again, any area, but we're talking about relationships specifically here. So how we speak about our dating relationships, how we speak about ourselves in relation to that becomes what we expect to see, and therefore it becomes what our external reality reflects back to us. So I bring this up to say, I think the first place to start is by looking at how we're describing the experiences that we've had, how we describe the expectation of what's available. So here's how you start to soften it. Because what if you're like, okay, Lindsay, that all sounds great, but here's why you don't understand. This has been my real situation. And the truth is, I know you probably have a lot of evidence. You probably have a ton of evidence for how what you've experienced in the past is not what you want to experience in the future. But realize that you have more control over that than you even think that you do in how you describe it. So how you start to soften that is even just by saying, here's what I've experienced in the past. The past 2 years of dating have not been what I want to experience. Am I willing to be open that there are other things available? Am I willing to look at a little bit of the deeper fears underlying why I've attracted these experiences in, or what they're trying to teach me and show me about myself so I can align myself with the type of partnerships that I want? And I'm not saying this to put the blame on anyone. I just look at it from the standpoint of whenever I am not getting the results that I want, and I've operated in business this way for the last decade plus, I look at, okay, what part of me is blocking what I actually want from finding me? What part of me, what belief, what fear is this asking me to address? Because once I unblock that, I know that what I want is available. So the things that you can start to do is start to notice the way that you speak about your experiences, the way you speak about yourself. And then can you show your subconscious mind that maybe what you want is available? Can you start to go and find examples of relationships, find empowering relationship expanders, right? I do this, like I said, a lot with aging. This is something, as a woman, I'm 41 now, in my 40s, I realize like most of the conversations around aging are not empowering whatsoever. So I curate my social media feeds. I curate even my friendships with women who are, a decade plus older than me and are thriving and are vibrant and they're living full lives, because I want my mind to see examples of the kind of future I want to live into. So when I started to entertain the idea of dating, I had to really rein in what I allowed into my awareness. I don't really allow people around me to tell me how dating is going to be for me. It's fine if they share how it's been for them, of course. I'm never going to tell someone that their real lived experience is not valid. But I was ruthless about this because it does not serve me and the kind of partnership I want. It does not serve the kind of love that I was calling in, to allow conversations about what isn't possible to be the dominant conversation. And you do have control over that. So the second piece of this is make a list of what is the most important to you, and not the kind of list that I think we are taught to make. I wrote a really, really, really detailed list. December of 2024, my divorce had just been finalized, and it was something that I was doing as a way to start to live into the future of what was possible well before I was even ready to explore the idea of dating. And the things that I wrote on this list were more about how I wanted to feel within a connection and what things were important to me that maybe I learned from my previous relationship experiences and I didn't even know were important to that version of me because I had grown so much. So do you want someone who is equally ambitious? When I read the first question, actually both of them, right? It's women who are clear that they want to feel supported in partnership. They want to be with authentic and genuine people. I think those type of characteristics are so much more important to get really clear about. And, instead of being fixated on a specific type in terms of like external aesthetics, it was that I want to experience like a high level of like attraction with someone. I really want to explore more of that side of my personality as a woman. Like I want to find connection with someone that it feels alive and it feels, there is a high level of physical attraction, and you can explain these things without getting super specific on things and what you think that person is going to look like or be like. And I think when we do that, when we start to focus more on the energy underlying the thing that we want to call in, it starts to set us up to be able to recognize it when we see it, and especially if it comes in a package that you didn't expect. So number one, get really clear about what it is that you want. Recognize where the way that you maybe speak about your current dating experiences or past dating experiences doesn't align with what you want to see in the future, and start to speak into that. Even if you don't believe it at first, at least start to open up your mind to entertain the fact that it could be different. And the third thing is get as clear as you can about what you want, and then go in search, even if it's in movies, even if it's not a real life depiction of this relationship, find examples that your mind can see that what you want is possible. If you are, going through a divorce and you want to find evidence that love in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond is possible, find examples of that and really flood your mind with the belief that you want to adopt. Because I guarantee that if you go and look for it, you can find those examples. And what it starts to do is it really starts to tune, your little GPS system to be on the lookout for the very thing that you want. Because I bet for most of us, the next level of what we want in relationships, in business, in any area is right around us. There are possibilities that we're just not even seeing because we're not showing up in a way right now that allows us to let those things in. And the last thing, and this is probably the most important, probably should have really started with this. Two more things, actually. The first one is when I made that list of what I wanted to experience in partnership, I then, because I wasn't ready to start dating, I started to live in a way that I would look at the list periodically and ask myself honestly, if I want someone else to show up for me in this way, am I showing up for me in this way? So if I want someone who's, really supportive, what am I doing this week to pour into and support myself? If I want someone who is really committed to their health and fitness, am I prioritizing that for myself? So I started to live out my own list, knowing that it wasn't like I had to work to be worthy of this person, but if I wanted to be aligned with this person, I would probably be the kind of individual who's already living that life. So number one, that was what I did. But then the last thing is, and this is really the most important that I think can easily become a block, and I see so clearly how it can, is being willing to look at your previous relationships and ask yourself what you can learn from them. What did they teach you about you? What do you see you have the opportunity to heal and to grow from? And no matter, how disappointing, a relationship was, no matter how much you're sure that you aren't the reason it failed, I guarantee you can find things within that very honest question that will point you to beautiful growth that you'll get to experience yourself as a new version. And therefore, you get to attract and call in someone who is more aligned and a new version of partnership because you've become new. And it takes a lot of humility and a lot of grace and a lot of honesty to do that. But I honestly think that was the most important work that I've done to prepare myself for, the dating world, if you will, is to have really done the work on myself to come in without my wounds speaking for me, to just be able to bring my most authentic self to these interactions. So there's a lot more to share on that. Obviously, that's what you get for today, but it's been a very eye-opening process. It's been honestly the biggest growth experience I've had since my divorce has been entertaining the idea of vulnerability again. It's taught me so much about myself. It's honestly helped me fall in love with myself. It's been really cool. And also, I definitely have some good stories. That's not to say that everything has been super easy or that there haven't been challenges, but the things that I can easily see how I could turn them into proof that all men are X, or see there's just not emotionally available people, in those situations, I realized it was mirroring something back to me to ask me, okay, am I good with me? No matter what this person thinks, no matter if I feel rejected because of XYZ, am I good with me? And on the other side of that was always a really beautiful breakthrough. So it really starts there. It really starts with the personal journey. I want to go on to the next question because I think this is going to build on that piece about healing. And Misty Mathis wrote in, how can I rebuild my life after a second divorce at 40 as a mom of 4 when I'm struggling to believe in my ability to start over and fear ending up alone, especially with my daughters leaving in 5 years? I've always been good at bouncing back at what life throws at me, but this time it feels harder. And, the truth is that, anyone who's been through it, I'm sure can attest to, divorce is a rupture of your entire life plan. No matter if you were the one who initiated it or if you had the most beautiful, amicable divorce, it is a trauma, essentially. It's taking the life path you thought you were going to live, and all of a sudden, not only do you find yourself missing the person you thought you were traveling that path with, but the path itself disappears. And what can easily happen is, because of the trauma that brings with it, meaning it just is such an upheaval of everything in life, everything we were expecting, everything we were finding safety and security in, it can make it just hard to see clearly how to move forward. So I want to voice that, because anyone who's in that situation, it is a very real thing. And I'm right now about 10 months post finalization. My actual divorce was finalized pretty quickly, but let's just say 18 months from the moment of really learning that this was the way that the path was disappearing in front of me, and just now starting to find some clarity on the path forward. And I didn't think it would take that long. I really thought that I would, especially just in my nature and the way that I tend to cope with things, throwing myself into, making plans and really being in doing mode. I thought that I would, I don't want to say bounce back, but let's just use that for lack of a better term. I just thought that I would kind of be moving forward more quickly and have a little bit more clarity about what that looked like. And I'm just allowing it to be okay that I have needed a lot of time. And I think the time has really served me. So I think going back to what I was saying in the previous question, for you, Misty, and anyone else who's kind of finding themselves in this place of the path in front of you has completely washed away. The person you thought you were traveling that path with is no longer in the picture, not in the picture in the same way that they were before. Realizing that what's beautiful about that is now you get the opportunity to create the path, and that it's okay if it takes a little bit of time for you to figure out what that path is going to look like. I think the deeper work about really taking that time to heal is especially looking at any beliefs that you realize have been triggered about yourself, in the fact that, especially if this was a second divorce, and some of you listening, maybe it's the first, or it's just a breakup that's really hitting you hard, and you realize it's bringing up some feelings about yourself that you don't want to take with you into the next relationship. There was a book that I read in the midst of this season for myself by Dr. Nicole LaPera. She's the holistic psychologist on Instagram. And the book is called How to Be the Love You Seek. It was the most pivotal book to read at that point of my journey. It helped me start to see where I could have easily made the beliefs that were triggered in the way that my divorce and everything unfolded. Those could have become my new way of seeing myself if I didn't understand that all that was happening was triggering something deep within that I needed to look at, because it was there under the surface all along. And I could see this as a beautiful opportunity to do some deeper healing. For me, it was a lot around my self-worth, my view of myself. And it was a surprise to me, quite honestly. I remember sitting kind of in the aftermath of the realization that I was going to be moving forward with divorce and just moving forward with, again, what I didn't ever think my path was going to look like. And something came out of my mouth that I never thought I would say about myself. I remember just saying, who is going to want me? And when I heard myself say it, it shocked me to hear it come out of my mouth, because that wasn't a conscious belief that I had. It wasn't something that I was going around thinking on a day-to-day basis, but clearly it was down there, right? It was under the surface. It was this deep fear of abandonment, and it helped me really access some deeper things, even from childhood, that if I hadn't healed them, I just think when we end up bringing those beliefs about ourselves into new relationships and connections, we don't realize that we're dating and we're trying to connect with people from a place of trying to fill a wound that cannot be filled by someone else. So that book, How to Be the Love You Seek, was instrumental for me in starting that healing process. And just knowing that, even the most confident people on the planet, we all have things. We all have beliefs that, we don't even know that they're running behind the scenes. It's like the programs that run in the background of the computer that you don't realize have a big effect on the output of the computer. It's draining the energy. And so what I'm so grateful about, even in the midst of going through what I went through, was it brought things to the surface that I didn't even know I needed to heal. And I wouldn't have become the version of myself that's sitting here today had I not been given the opportunity to face those things. So I highly recommend that book. And this last question I'm going to just read really quickly as well, because it wraps up this conversation that we're having just about the depth that relationships, divorce, breakups, the depth that grief can be transformative if we're not afraid to feel it. And I thought this question was so sweet, because Michelle Kane said she'd love some advice for her close friend and business partner. I just thought that was so sweet. She said she's recently had a sudden split from her long-term boyfriend. She's really struggling to emotionally get back on her feet and just doesn't feel like herself anymore. And I, again, can really understand that. I think it's important just to speak to the fact that, for me, it was a 15-year relationship, very formative, like from the time I was 25 to 40. And just to think of how much I grew and changed during that time. And that relationship had been such a big part of my identity. It felt like a part of me was ripped away. So I just want to speak to the very real grief that comes along with it. Doesn't matter how long the relationship has been, but specifically if it has been a longer relationship, that is a big part of you. And so giving yourself that time to grieve, like fully allowing yourself to grieve in whatever way feels appropriate for you, I think, again, is important to be able to move through those feelings and not just bring them with you into the next chapter. And I think there was a part of me that knew that if I didn't pause and feel everything that was available to me to feel in that season, I was gonna have to face it somewhere else down the road. A book that really helped me through the grieving part specifically is a book that is called The Grieving Brain. The Grieving Brain. I don't have the author, but we'll link it in the show notes. I had to understand what grief actually does in the brain in order to allow myself to really go there. Because especially as someone who is very ambitious and I don't love to slow down, my grieving process really required me to slow down and to ask for a lot more help and to go more inward, which I do love. I love the inner work, but it was a depth of inner work that I hadn't really touched before. And it produced some of the most beautiful breakthroughs on the other side. So again, anyone who's more in the breakup, recovering from breakup part of your journey, the two books that I've recommended, The Grieving Brain and then How to Be the Love You Seek, would be like number 1 and 2 on the required reading list. And just understand that this process, the grieving of a relationship, the grieving of the version of yourself that you were in that relationship, can be such an initiation into your next self, but not if we try to rush our way there. We have to allow this cathartic process to change us, and change takes time. But who you get to become on the other side, who I got to become on the other side, is the woman I've always dreamed of being. And if I could go back, I never would have chosen the path that led me here, but I would not go back for any amount of money. I would not trade anything in the world for the person I got to become on the other side of it. So I know that it's hard to see that when you're really in it, but I do want to speak and give hope to those who are just feeling the tougher emotions of a breakup or a divorce or grieving a relationship of any kind, that I do think that grief can transform us. I believe it's meant to transform us. It made me stronger, but it also made me softer. And the softness is what's been this beautiful open space for new love to come in. And that is the thing that I can see, especially as being someone who is ambitious and very self-sufficient. I could have allowed that experience to harden me, which would have cut off the exact thing that I wanted. So for my girlies out there who are going through heartbreak and you're listening to Taylor Swift's earlier albums on heartbreak, you're not listening to the latest album where she's a lover girl again. Just know that there is healing. There is, and there's hope, and there's so much love for you to experience, but it starts with the love that you cultivate for yourself. And I am just right there with you in the trenches. I was on the apps for a hot moment, more on that later. But yeah, for now, I just want you to know that, you're not alone in this process. We're not meant to do business or life. And I now guess we get to add dating and divorce and all that into the mix as well. Never thought we'd be here, but here we are.